Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the Cratus series of webinars. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Bristol Mayor Marvin Rees to discuss the opportunities and challenges that Bristol and the region are grappling with at the moment. My firm hope from this is that the session might spark other discussions about how we can all harness our collective enthusiasm for making our city region better, and also perhaps to encourage more thinking around how we work and share ideas and solutions with other cities. Mayor Rees, welcome. As many of you will know, Mayor Rees was elected mayor in May 2016, declaring Bristol a city of hope, built on inclusion, social justice and ambition, a city that is open for business. During his first term in office, he's overseen the building of over 8,000 homes, announced the potential development of a mass transit system, and provided quality work experiences for children who wouldn't readily have access. He's supported the council to become a living wage employer and introduced Ban the Box to create fairness in the job application process. He's also supported the successful bid to bring the Channel 4 Creative Hub to Bristol, as well as leading the city's response to both the climate and ecological emergencies. And for those of you who don't already know Cratus, we're a dedicated advisory and public affairs consultation and engagement consultancy with a focus of working with and within local government. We help private sector clients to navigate the complexities of the local public sector by creating effective relationships, as well as engaging directly with councils to further enhance their ability to support the communities they serve. We do this nationwide, from offices in London, Bristol, Southampton and Manchester. So as part of our commitment, and indeed my commitment to helping people connect for mutual benefit, our audience today is genuinely cross-cutting, including the private, public and third sector, from Bristol, the Weka region, the wider Southwest, and indeed representatives from other cities. Now, the format today is slightly different to our recent panel sessions, and I shall be asking a series of wide-ranging questions around the growth challenges and opportunities for Bristol, including around how we enable genuinely sustainable growth and how the city intends to continue to work with the wider region and with other core cities. This has all been informed by questions that you've already sent to me, so thank you for those. But there'll also be an opportunity for you to ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. We'll try and get through as many as we can towards the end of the session. For those of you live tweeting, it's at Cratus.com and hashtag AskCratus. So to the questions. I think we often start thinking about development and growth from an economic standpoint. And so I'd really like to begin this discussion by looking at things more from a social and cultural perspective. So we can't ignore that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And even though we're sort of feeling our way around what the world looks like as we come out of lockdown, I was wondering, Mayor Rees, whether you think that COVID-19 has actually shone a bit of a positive light on what Bristol really needs. So in short, has it identified the basic inequalities and perhaps specifically deprivation that exist in the city?
Marvin's fine, by the way. So, but yeah, I mean, certainly it's exposed the fragilities within Bristol and exposed our underlying weaknesses and where we lack resilience and where we're strong. No one likes to have themselves exposed like that, but actually, if we see it right, it's an incredible opportunity. So that, you know, the phrase "build back better" has been used. There's an incredible opportunity to understand those weaknesses and build them out of our future economy. Just a few weeks ago, we convened a whole group of academics, and we had a guest speaker, Rob Mugger, who does a lot of work in the UN around urban security. Come and facilitated it with someone we got through C40 as well, to help us think through how we can reimagine the city's future, so that space that's been left or will be left by a contracting economy, we don't just replace it with what was before, but we replace it with something better. And I do welcome the focus on the social aspects of COVID, you know, as well. I did an interview this morning, and one of the points I really wanted to raise was that economic recovery, or any recovery, is not just about the big numbers. I think we've got a lot of people, we've experienced some collective and individual trauma through this, be it mental health, loss of family, loss of home, loss of security, and dealing with the human costs of this period of COVID and lockdown is key to building a resilient workforce in the future as well. So it is about social justice, but it's also about economic sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there are actually some practical opportunities as well, thinking around the built environment as a result of COVID? So there have been a lot of people locked down in perhaps smaller homes than they need or want. Are there chances, do you think, to build in better provision in terms of external space standards, internal space standards, doing more in terms of, as we've seen recently, pedestrianisation of the city centre, improving cycle links, those sorts of things?
Well, we've had a disruption in continuity, and it's into that disruption that we get the opportunity to try things out. So we've taken the opportunity of fewer people driving and traveling around the city to introduce pedestrianisation, because the opportunity was there, and that's been great. So we've been able to bring forward a whole bunch of schemes, cycle lanes, widening pavements that ordinarily would have taken us longer. That's also been helped by the fact that DFT have put some money forward. So again, we've been able to draw down on that. I hope that the major opportunity that we've been pushing for as well is that the government needs to stimulate the economy. We're not going to go on a journey of economic recovery simply by taking the pressure off of lockdown. That's a very hands-off, passive approach. Our economic recovery would be helped, at least, and hopefully assured, by the government actually beginning to drive it, and that means spending money. But actually, even as I use that term, that's not enough. It's investing. So front-loading green infrastructure, and by that I mean efficient housing, retrofitting homes, low-carbon transport, decarbonise our energy system. You can front-load that investment. It provides jobs. It keeps people off of the need to rely on public services, and we begin to benefit now rather than in 6 years' time from a collection of city systems that are reducing the amount of carbon they pump into the planet, and actually are designed to improve biodiversity within our city systems as well. So that space, I read a quote recently in George Soros's book. He said his father said to him, it's in times of turmoil that the impossible becomes possible. And so we're really pushing on those possibilities with the core cities as well at the moment.
I mean, clearly the revenue deficit, which I think stands at probably more than 80 million now for Bristol, is going to be a problem. And what sort of impact do you think that's going to have on all these competing priorities? And if national government isn't necessarily going to give all of the answers, what strengths are there in the devolved alternative, do you think?
It's a huge challenge for us. And again, as with the core cities, this is a point of constant lobbying to government. So just so people know how that numbers come about, we are looking at probably around about £30 million increased costs directly from COVID. Added to that, we've lost revenue. So we've had, obviously over near 5,000 people come forward for the council tax reduction scheme. We've lost fees, we've lost parking charges. That is, the lost revenue comes to about 80 million. At the moment, what government have been saying is they will recognise the increase in costs, but they're not really recognising the lost revenues. And I think it's in part because they're failing to understand just how important local authorities engaging in activities to raise revenue has become to funding core services. It's not a bit of pocket change on top of the government grant. This is a core requirement now. So that's how we got to that 80 million. Now the consequences of this are pretty stark. One is we take a financial hit. So again, off the back of 10 years of austerity, this again is more pressure on our budget. Now we need to balance our budget. That's our legal requirement, and we want to protect our frontline services. So we are now having to go into our earmarked reserves that would have gone into some of our infrastructure plans and redirect that money and start looking at how we would actually put it into the safeguarding of frontline services. So we've got this dilemma. Not only are crises competing with each other with our limited finance, but actually there's a competition between crises and the money we would like to spend on preventative measures, and actually putting good quality transport in, good quality housing produces better health. It's a preventative intervention. So we've a real dilemma there. The other challenge, particularly for the development sector, that they could really do with pointing this out to national government is that if local government does not have the capacity to deliver on planning and bringing our schemes forward, we essentially become a bottleneck to development because we're the planning authorities, right? So we've already started to look through some of our major projects and to work out which ones are priorities and which ones, you know, we would bring down down that list of priorities. So we need, you know, I jokingly say when people protest, they protest for frontline services, right? But no one ever protests for planners and lawyers, and yet it's planners and lawyers we need to keep the city lubricated so we can get development done. And we urgently need government to take that seriously.
Great. Thinking about how the sort of social and cultural elements feed into all of this then, and talking about protests. Clearly we've seen in recent weeks how events that happen outside our own city bubbles, if you like, influence events closer to home, and thinking particularly about the Black Lives Matter movement and the Colston statue removal. So this is a bit of a two-part question here. Can social and cultural capital be a means to support the local economy? And what would you like to see the development industry do more of in terms of respecting and engaging with local communities?
So I certainly think social and cultural capital is hugely important to the economy. It's been one of our big sales points in Bristol. I mean, the relocation of Channel 4 to Bristol was in part about our social capital. Right at the beginning of that process, for example, we came out the traps and recognised that any city in the country could offer a nice building in a nice location within that city. That's not going to be the sales point, a big shiny building. I think the sales point was going to be, what are you offering in terms of life, in terms of the priorities of the city or the place, and are you the kind of people that when things go wrong, as inevitably they will sometimes, that you can get problem solved with, right? So that culture is massively important. It's given us huge profile around the world. I've just come off our weekly leaders call, and Guy Alpen was on there from University of Bristol, and this was one of the questions and opportunities he raised. There's a lot of profile come to Bristol through this, but actually we're also being watched in the way we respond to it. And if we respond well, understanding the issue, dealing with all the dynamics around inequality, how we build a city, and we're doing a lot of work with the city's history now. Again, our reputation, our stock on the global stage will continue to rise, and to be known about is good, right? When we're trying to get the investment we need. In terms of the developers working with our communities, I would like developers to do two things, right? One is, make sure that government understand the need to support local authorities so we can be a dependable partner to the development sector. If we can have certainty over our finance, then we can provide much more certainty as a development partner. If we have uncertain finance, then by definition, we are really weakened in that area. But we do want developers to also engage in the city conversation here that we have a housing crisis today. We need to deliver homes. We have a climate emergency and a biodiversity emergency. We need to deliver homes in the face of a climate emergency and a biodiversity emergency. That shapes the kind of conversation the city has around the kind of homes we have and where we put them. And for the sector to begin helping us facilitate that conversation with the city would be very welcome. Do
you think a lot of residents of Bristol still see development as being something that's done to them rather than for them or with them? And I say that sort of across the industry as opposed to it being council-led development necessarily.
Yeah, somewhat. I think coming from a background myself, coming from my own personal background, on the margins of this city with a lot of the kind of establishment organisations having no mind to me, and then worked in the voluntary sector and worked on mental health inequality, so very much dealing with people's on the margins. I want to be quite serious about how we express that sense of the world is happening to me, because actually, to be perfectly frank, there are people and groups who actually have lived on the sunny side of Bristol's life and lived lives of quite some privilege, and actually the city's worked for them. And I struggle when I know people who genuinely live on the margins of society to square the complaints of some people about their own sense of powerlessness with people who I know who are really powerless, right? And in some sense, it's played too easily. But I do understand that kind of general distance from politics and the need to make sure people are not only involved but feel that they're involved. as well. And there's something we have to work hard on, which is why I say facilitating those conversations. I had a conversation with Acorn yesterday about this. We've obviously campaigned for better quality housing. And one of the points I made was, let's campaign for better quality housing, but let's also campaign for affordable housing to be built. Sorry, when we're protecting private tenants, and so we don't end up with a crisis, we avert the crisis. I do understand that sense of marginalisation, but I think sometimes it's said too quickly.
Yeah. I mean, provided that we take our communities along the journey with us. I mean, Bristol has some really significant growth opportunities at the moment, currently and in the longer term. So, Hengrove Park, residential developments, Temporal Quarter, Froome Gateway, Western Harbour. Just be interested in how you view these opportunities and what your hope might be for how proactive collective ambition could influence the city's future prosperity through those sorts of schemes.
I mean, I'm pro-development in that sense, and I say that, and I know that puts some out because I'm pro-housing, right? We need to build houses for people, and I think housing is, and I think Paul Smith's on the call now. I mean, it's the flagship policy intervention, isn't it, for mental health, educational life. When Paul and I went to one of the houses developments up in St. Anne's, you meet a family. We met a family. They've moved in with their two daughters. Two young children. One was still in a pram and the other was about 2 years old. As I met that family, it was incredible because I thought, actually, every indicator in that family's lives has just gone in the right direction. The likely success of their marriage, their own mental health and well-being, their ability to manage, a job, the ability to escape food and fuel poverty, the likely educational success, of their children, their safety. Everything's gone in the right direction because we provided homes for those. For that family and the others on that development as well. So massively important. So I see all of those developments done in the right way with the right engagement as an incredible opportunity to meet one of Bristol's biggest challenges, and that is the housing crisis, but do it in a way that does not cause us more problems, but actually helps us meet the other challenges, which is climate emergency, social inequality, and ecological emergency.
Yeah. I think I'll take a question actually on one of the growth areas that's just popped up. It's from Alan Pierce, inquiring about how progress is advancing on the St Philip's Marsh, so Temple Quarter master plan, and Silverthorne Lane, a key area for regeneration in the enterprise zone, important for delivery for housing and employment in the next plan period. And also a question about how the strategic flood defence proposal is evolving. Do you know?
Yeah, so I mean, we're constantly pushing. We pulled together a board built around Temple Meads and the regeneration of Temple Meads with 3 new entrants east, the front entrance on the ramp, but also adding a south entrance to it as well. Obviously, increase accessibility to the south. On that board is myself, Network Rail, Homes England, University of Bristol, Tim Bowles, Heritage England DFT come as well. And we've pulled together a board that can really drive this. Look, I go back to the point I made earlier on. It's just about getting certainty from government. We get a lot of positive noises about it, but it needs to land. I don't know if there's some kind of handshake or tie I need to wear to just get it over the line. I mean, you're in development, you know how this works, right? And it makes sense. Everyone says it makes sense. So that is, delivering that scheme is massively important to us, and obviously supporting the university's new campus is massively important. We see that as a gateway, obviously, with the LNG to unlocking the rest of that site. So the work is ongoing. We had a board meeting just a couple of weeks ago. We're looking to enter into an MOU with Homes England as well to again solidify that relationship between us, our aspiration, and Homes England. And our hope is that in the coming weeks, when we understand government may be about to announce the big infrastructure projects that they're going to support to stimulate the economy, that we will be among them.
Great. You mentioned gateways. It's probably quite timely to hear from you, if you don't mind, on the Western Gateway Powerhouse. We've clearly got, as a region, not just as a city, fantastic opportunities across the whole of the Southwest and South Wales. We've already got exciting things happening, attracting international attention from the likes of Elon Musk, who, if we're to believe the reports, is perhaps looking around Avonmouth and Sevenside or the This Is Gravity campus. We've also got cybersecurity development potentially coming forward at Golden Valley and Cheltenham. So lots of really good things that mean that we have a lot to offer as a region as a whole. But I'm not sure at the moment if everybody's quite up to speed on what's happening with the Gateway.
So we launched it last year in the House of Lords. Fantastic support from Lord Kerslake, and we had cross-party support for the launch. And I went up to the Lords with myself, Hugh, leader of Cardiff, Toby was there, leader of South Gloss. We had other leaders from South Wales as well. So we've got that momentum and government very supportive. Then there was a second kind of government-initiated launch over at the Celtic Manor. And what I think the positive news about that was that Alan Cairns, who was the Welsh Minister at the time, and Sajid Javid both wanted their quotes in the press release that went along to the launch of Western Gateway, which says it's got the buy-in, because we recognise that economic patch, 4.4 million people, is not just something we pulled out of the air. There was a piece of work to look at what is the functioning economic area and how could we work as a functioning economic area. And up and down the M4 and then north and south M5 between Gloucester and North Somerset proved to be that area with the two core cities of Bristol and Cardiff at its heart. And if I'm not misquoting this, I think there are more commuters between Bristol and Cardiff than there are between Manchester and Leeds for the Northern Powerhouse. So we were saying actually there's a really strong case for this. Since that time, we've appointed an independent chair. That's Catherine Bennett from Airbus. Who's been doing a fantastic job going around being an advocate, both amongst existing local authorities and LEPs, but also with national government as well. We have a regular catch-up of all the local authority leaders and LEPs covered by this patch in the Western Gateway. And we've produced a first kind of brochure really setting out our aims to be, it is what it says on the tin. We want to be a gateway to the global economy from the UK out, but also a gateway into the UK economy from the world in. We've got ports, we've got airports, we've got the motorway, we've got the rail station, we've got fantastic history, as you said, in cyber, digital and tech and finance. We think we make a really strong offer. And I want the Northern Powerhouse to succeed and the Midlands Energy to succeed. We don't want to try and do them down. But what I would say is I think that we offer a coherence in our economic offer, because we have not gone on such an expansive area that pulls everyone in just simply on the basis of geography. I think that gives us a real strength.
In terms of what you're alluding to regarding collective buy-in and what you might learn from other regions, are there particular structures, do you think, need to be in place that aren't already, in terms of enabling core cities to work better together, to have more conversations? And also, for anyone based in the Southwest, there are other core still cities that I think if you're an investor, you might look to and say, well, Exeter is still, is an important growth area, but it's not part of the Gateway. How can we do more to enable those sorts of discussions to happen?
So we want to be clear about the Western Gateway. It has a boundary because that's what the research showed us was our economic footprint. But at the same time, we are prepared and we want to be firm about that. Otherwise, we'll have no identity. It'll just be, come one, come all. But at the same time, we are also saying that we will talk to people, and where there's an overlap of interests, and we could all benefit from taking collective action, we will. That's because we want to be very pragmatic about it. In terms of structures to help networks like core cities work together, I mean, I suggest there are two areas. One is the structures that support the cities to work with each other on a very direct level. We meet, and that's good, and we've done some joint planning, but I think the thing that will take us over the line is when we start spending money together. We had a proposal, and it's kind of been scuppered by COVID and cabinet changes, but let's see if we can get it back on track, that for example, that rather than each city buying, 100 biogas buses, why don't we all come together and buy 500 biogas buses and benefit from economies of scale? I think it was Kit Malthouse, who was the Minister in Transport at the time, was really supportive of that. And he came to see me here, and Craig Cheney went up to core cities and shared it there, and there was enthusiasm. But I said, what we would then could really do from government would be some help setting up that financial vehicle that would allow us to move together to make that bulk buy. You could do the same around modular homes, for example, or materials for retrofitting, so that the cities move together and benefit from economies of scale. You need government support to put that in place. The other thing I would just say about structure is that it needs to be built into the rhythm of national decision making. I think national governments working alone across a whole range of issues, from climate change to migration, are just showing that they cannot deliver. That doesn't mean we need national government, but it's working alone that's the problem. And they need to build into the rhythm of their decision making active conversation with cities, so that we are collectively working on solutions. You see the examples of where that failure to do that has resulted in problems. The reopening of schools, that was a decision made on a podium in London or in a think tank in Whitehall, and it wasn't appropriate to take a one-size-fits-all approach to the whole of the UK, even within one city. Same with food distribution. The same with the masks and NHS hospitals that was announced without consultation. So building that rhythm of conversation into the development of policy and how we govern, I think could be one of the richest areas to mine new approaches to policy in the UK, more effective leadership.
Yeah, I mean, there are always going to be alternative solutions to policy-based approaches, and I'm really interested in the previous discussions that you've held around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. How is that really the key to balancing sustainability principles? Not just in new development, but everything that happens in the city and beyond.
I think the UN Sustainable Development Goals are a fantastic opportunity. There's a number of things about. I mean, our relationship with them has been one that's grown. So first off, we started to write the One City Plan. We had these principles of inclusion and sustainability, and then the SDGs are with us, and we thought, well, let's begin mapping the plan up against the SDGs and seeing how they work. Then we said, well, let's do a local voluntary review. We'll say Alan McLeod, I'm going to steal his thunder. Alan McLeod then came down from the University of Bristol. This is his area of expertise. And started to look at how we map against the Sustainable Development Goals. Now you can go online and look at the Bristol One City dashboard and look at the One City Plan, and you can actually click on an SDG and it will bring you up all of the aims listed in the Bristol One City Plan against each SDG, which is phenomenal. So you can search by SDG, in Bristol's ambitions. So we've grown, and now we're saying actually it shouldn't just be a reference point. We should be making the SDGs an explicit aim of what we're trying to do. So our joint spatial plan, was rejected. We've got to replace it with an SDS from the beginning. So I said, well, it's not great that the JSP failed, but actually it's an opportunity, because we didn't have that same sense of urgency around inequality, climate, and ecology when the joint spatial plan was written. So why don't we make the SDGs, an outcome that our approach to spatial planning has to deliver, right? And we've done that now. We brought an amendment to the Combined Authority because it was kind of missed out, but we brought an amendment on Friday, and the SDGs are now core to what we're going to do with our spatial planning. The other thing I like about the SDGs is that they are rounded. I get a significant amount of single issue activism in a complicated world. So when people talk about climate, for example, and they say, yeah, we're going to have to suffer some inconvenience, but it's worth it because the world's going to die. I mean, to people with a bit of spare disposable income, that inconvenience is nothing. To people who literally run out of money in the third week of every month, that inconvenience is not eating. And you have to, when we're looking at sustainability, we have to think about the whole range, right? From the SDGs that go from tackling poverty to hunger to women's issues to climate, life on land, life on sea, quality employment, quality political representation and leadership. So it gives us a much more mature and rounded and multidimensional framework within which to think about our future development.
Sure. We've had a number of questions come in around climate strategy generally. I think some of that you've covered off, but just generally, how can the development community support Bristol's One City climate strategy? And there's another element to that, just about how do we ensure it remains a key priority in residential developments. And I've also had something come in around district heating.
Okay, so I'm trying to make a note because I've got a load of thoughts going. So on climate, how can they support it? One is familiarise yourself with the climate strategy, so because there are a whole bunch of principles within it. And I would say what we want is when you start coming to talk to us about development now, it would be fantastic if you can come with explicit assessment of how you are delivering the sustainable development goals. And I would say this is not just a nice to have. I think this is going to become increasingly attractive on the world stage to investors. And it also links us up with a global conversation with Helsinki, New York, Los Angeles, other cities that are active on the SDGs. And I'm pleased to say that Bristol is really seen as a bit of a global leader on the SDGs now, because we've just got such good people working on them in Bristol. So think proactively, and in your work, come to us and say, we've looked at all the 17, bam, bam, give us a score out of 10, and this is what we're doing on each of them. Specifically on climate, again, just familiarise yourself with the SDGs. If you want help, on the climate strategy, if you want help with the climate strategy, and can I also say our ecological strategy, which is coming out in the coming weeks, Saving Wildlife Trust has been leading on that. We could, I'm sure we could set up sessions with members of our team and probably the city's environment board and even the advisory committee on climate change that we set up in Bristol, to have sessions with development industry to talk about the best, right? What is the best? What puts us out, in front on delivering it. For our end, and I raised this morning in my Radio 4 interview, we're very concerned about the dash for growth now, the dash for recovery, leading to a values-free form of economic recovery. And we'll miss the opportunity to stop, take a deep breath, and rather than just resuscitating the old Frankenstein that was, compounding inequalities and killing the planet, that we should think differently about the very nature of our economy, and be very explicit in producing one that is both more resilient to future shocks, but less likely to produce future shocks because it has a lighter footprint on the planet. And I think we can do that. But again, we're going to need government to help us with that, because if we can plan ahead over 10, 15, 20 years of development with bankable government partnership, then we can plan in a very measured way. If we end up on the back foot in the face of social crisis, compounding inequalities, social instability, and all that, then it's going to be very hard to do the kind of planning forethought we need that will give us that level of sustainability. So keep going on to government about the need to give us certainty at the level of place in our cities.
Great, thank you very much. That's really helpful. I've got more questions coming in, so I shall try and take as many as I can. If I try and combine a couple of different ones about housing and density. So the first is from Matthew around whether there's a preference for the US high-rise city model, or would taking reference from historic European cities be preferable for our economic future, since beautiful cities attract skilled talent? And perhaps looking at not quite the flip side, but the other element of what homes do we deliver. A question from Roni about modern methods of construction and whether it's playing a bigger role in the city.
So our preference is to provide homes for, there's a number of things that are true at the same time. Our preference is to provide homes for people. It's to provide homes for people in a way that doesn't destroy the planet and helps us deliver biodiversity, and to provide homes for people that allow them to live healthy lives that are full of well-being, not just avoiding sickness. And what we want is to work with people who can help us deliver that, design and deliver that kind of city in the collection of systems. I mean, I think I recognise the question. I mean, I don't think that height in and of itself, maybe I shouldn't go, it could probably get tweeted, but I don't think height in and of itself is the determinant of deprivation. Plenty of rich people live in tall buildings. I think that's quite simple. The things that go into poverty, and having lived the life of poverty in itself, is also inconsistent work, the inability to to pay the bills, a sense of hopelessness. So I think it's just one tool among many that we should consider. But city design is hugely important, and we got to choose the right option in the right way, with our communities. But density, Bristol isn't getting any geographically bigger. Increased density has to be something we pursue, not least because if you build great passive houses, but they are not within active travel distance of major work, retail and entertainment zones, you're building a dependency on transport. And we need to build in lower dependency on transport. So there's one challenge, a conundrum we have to take on. In terms of MMC, I was just reading the article actually about the new development that includes the Bristol Housing Festival and Book Clock and LNG as well. That £3 million scheme that's going to unlock about 78 million quid's worth of MMC housing in Bristol. And I'm pleased to say that people like Jeremy Sweetland have just been phenomenal in the Bristol Housing Festival, working with others that just putting Bristol on the front foot of modular homes. So we do want it to be, in our toolbox as well of delivering more homes, more quality homes, faster, efficient homes, so we can help meet our housing crisis. And anyone who wants to be a part of that and contribute to it, we're open doors. Hopefully we can get that local supply chain going as well, because it means factories. Hopefully we can get some factories down here as well, so we're producing the homes we actually end up living in, which would be a beautiful circle to complete.
It's ties quite nicely with a question I've had from Paul about building Bristol. What homegrown local businesses are involved in building Bristol, and what's the mechanism or route for enabling engagement with those businesses so that we can make the best use of genuinely local skills?
Yeah, so one of the probably best examples of that is We Can Make up in the West. They're involved in this scheme with Bristol Housing Festival. They showcased down at Bristol Housing Festival when it was on the waterfront as well. And there's a fantastic story when I went to visit one of the homes of a local plumber who actually earned the money to buy his tools that then went into business by working on one of the first homes as well. So we very much are looking at how we complete the circle of getting the local jobs, local economic multiplier going. It also comes back to a point I've been making with government and will continue to make. If they can give us certainty and give us forewarning of major investment in the city, particularly our infrastructure, then we'll be able to plan in inclusive economic development. So if we know that the scheme's coming in 2 years, not only can we begin to look at the local supply chain, local floor layers, window fitters, electricians, plumbers, and all the other things that need to, all the other skills that are going to be needed, but we can begin to equip people with those skills, particularly those who have lost their jobs when furlough comes to an end, and we have people out of work, people to retrain and to have the skills that are going to be needed to take advantage of the new kind of economic opportunity that could come our way. So we do want to be proactive about it.
Changing tack slightly, I've got a question from David. The COVID crisis may have exacerbated the move away from traditional high street retail and possibly reduced demand for commercial office space. So looking ahead, what's your vision for Bristol city centre, and how can we lead the way towards a more vibrant, economically and socially sustainable 24/7 use city, in effect?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is something that we are wrestling with. How many people are going to come back to work, and how many offices are going to believe that they need to have offices in the middle of the city? So there's a little bit unknown there. Interestingly, Mohammed, who's the chief executive of Wessex Water, said that with so many staff working at home, they actually did find that productivity went up, and a number of staff were incredibly happy to be working at home. And so they went through changes in work habits that they didn't think would have been possible 6 months ago, but now we find that it's working out quite positively. Now people are going to come back into work, obviously, but again, how much of that? So there was an existing challenge to our high streets and our city centres anyway, and we've got groups looking at that. But I think the same principle or the same factors in place then are here now. They're going to have to be much more mixed. So they won't be able to depend on just retail. We'll need a mix of retail and entertainment and residential. in those spaces as well. Just to let you all know as well, that with the core cities, as well as asking government to front load investment in green infrastructure around housing, transport and energy, we said it would be really a powerful signal if government would just say, do you know what, we're going to stand with you and we're going to make sure your city centres succeed and your high streets succeed. And what we're not saying is write us a blank check. What we're saying is make a commitment to working in partnership with us for success. Some of the money that we may end up needing to invest will be from the public sector, but some of it will be from the private sector. But at the moment, the relationship is kind of, well, you do what you do, and then come to us in 12 months and tell us what you've done, and we'll tell you whether it's good enough or not. We can't work like that anymore. We have to be co-creators of our, and co-owners of our successes, and our failures. So we'll keep pushing for that government commitment to town and city centres and high streets, and hopefully they'll listen and start working with us on a day-to-day basis.
What's so far as things might have progressed happening in terms of the nighttime economy and any strategy around that, and also thinking about the visitor economy generally? I've got a question here from James. How do you intend to help the hospitality sector reopen? So that's a COVID directed question. What sort of types of accommodation does the city need? Where would you want to see hotel development take place, etc.? All these things have to sit alongside or within our growth areas.
Yeah, wickedly, and we recognise the hit that's been had on those sectors. I mean, our economy board that we already had in existence through the city office, immediately as COVID loomed up and we anticipated a lockdown, actually started to meet weekly with two big themes: survival and then recovery. So we got on it quite quick. I'm not saying that was the magic pill, but at least we've been wrestling over how do we protect our different sectors. Leisure, nighttime economy, digital and creative, our venues and filmmaking, and aerospace. All these things have been wrestled with, and in fact, some of the work of that group will be shared on Friday at Bristol City Gathering with a statement of economic intent. And our hope is that will give a framework for government to be able to see how serious we are and coordinated we are, and again, being an attractive thing with investment. And Nicola, this is an area that Nicola Beach has been working on so much as well with Annabelle. So I don't want to butcher what they would have said, but the points I was making this morning on radio was, one is we need certain guidelines from government, clarity on the health and safety in the workplace. One is it gives employers and venues more confidence to open up, but it will give hopefully the public more confidence to go out. And to those venues again, for those that will be fearful, because I don't just think that people are going to pop out their homes and start going out and living before. There's been a lot of fear for people individually and who they might be taking the virus home to if they're not sure. But if they're sure that the guidance has been there and it's been followed, that would be very positive. The other is that we need the track and trace system in place. Again, it will just give us more confidence that the systems around us are in place to support, to keep us safe as we begin emerging from lockdown. And I hope that what that will do again is give the employers, the venues, the nighttime economy, entrepreneurs more sense of what they need to do to be safe themselves, keep the employers safe, and keep the public safe, and give the public more confidence in going out to those venues. And the third pillar I would say is a clarity on the plan, the outbreak plan. So if we have another outbreak, and there are going to be further outbreaks, that's just inevitable, that the public are confident and business are confident that we have the measures in place to manage it. I've just come off a call with our Director of Public Health, actually, and she describes it like this, that over the coming months, there are going to be lots of little fires, that it's just going to happen, right? What people need to know is that when that fire comes up, we can come around it, we can isolate it, and we can manage it. That way you avoid the fires joining up and becoming another blaze, leading to another coercive lockdown with all the problems that brings. So that's what we're just trying to put the structures around it. Outside of that, we've tried to get any government money we've received, we've got it out the door as quickly as we can to support businesses. We've got about 70 to 80 million pound out the door. We're one of the top 10 performing local authorities in getting that money out to business. And the team here, it's not me that's doing it, the work on that. The team here were just outstanding. So we'll continue to do that. But if there are specific asks of us, that are needed, please come to us with those, asking us bits of direction on what can be done as the local authority, but also as the city.
Great. I'm just looking at a different element of the economy then. I've got a question from John around employment floor space. So in the race to provide new homes across the city, how do we make sure that factories and workspace can be retained? How do we protect our key employment areas? Not everybody wants to be pushed towards relocating to Avonmouth. So really about how do we secure the supply of employment land moving forward?
Yeah, and this is an issue that Helen Holland, Cabinet Lead for Adult Social Care, raised very earlier on about we need to house people, but we just don't want to cover everything in houses. We need to have that mix. So that will come to how we plan the use of that land, and and the needs assessment we have of what we need to put in place to support our economic. Well, previously it was our economic flourishing, but now it's survival and then back to flourishing. Hopefully, we'll begin to shape how we plan our land use in the city. As we'll different. For example, when we think about the pressure and climate emergency and active travel, that will begin to feature into our new SDS to replace the spatial plan, because we want to build active travel into our development. So mixing residential and employment space is going to be another feature of the reconceptualized, replanned, and then rebuilt city going into the future. So it is one of our concerns for our planners.
I think we perhaps take one more question, so we'll run out of time soon, I think. On developers' engagement, how can we speed things up to mutual benefit to deliver homes quicker? This is specifically with regard to planning as potentially being a major hurdle to developers in terms of time and cost. And that's something that's quite close to my heart as an ex-planner who's desperately trying to ensure that people have conversations across property planning, policy, development, investment.
I say, first of all, come with excellent schemes. that always helps, and doing some of that engagement early with the communities is, just makes life run smoother. And again, if I can just refer people back to, if you start picking up the SDGs, it's part of a global conversation, and it will help us because that's the language we're going to be using. I'll be frank with you, there's a lot of pressure on the team, and I've had to kind of check myself recently about how much we're asking of them, because capacity is really limited. When we first came into office, we did talk to developers about what they can do, what they could do collectively to support the council's capacity, because it's not for lack of desire, certainly on our part. It's simply about hours in the day, days in the week, and how much we can reasonably ask of people while taking care of their own well-being. But bringing resource into the local authority so that we are able to keep the city lubricated would be a challenge that we would welcome talking to people about, putting firewalls in place as well. And it's something that you need to continue to talk to MHCLG about, and whoever you have to influence national government policy, just to take seriously how sizable the financial challenge is that local authorities are facing.
Right, thank you. So I think just to close then, perhaps an understanding of what your ask might be of anyone listening today in terms of how they engage with the city. I mean, we held a webinar recently with Chris Naylor, who's the new interim chief executive at Birmingham City Council. And he sort of referred to the fact that, there's no version of the future where people won't want to be engaged with, and, the importance of tapping into the enthusiasm. I think for some people, understanding where the front door, if you like, into the council is can be quite difficult. And you've helpfully referenced how we might be able to have conversations around climate change, etc. But what would you ask people to do in terms of engaging?
So the front door into the council should be pretty straightforward. It's through the city plan, and it's through the cabinet leads, Nicola and Paul. That's in terms of identifying specific political leadership to work with the sector and navigate the intricacies of Bristol City Council. That's what that was about. So the plan gives you that long-term narrative that we're working on. You can familiarise yourself with that. but you can connect with the politicians as well. And I would welcome you doing that. But I would also ask the sector to, again, take up that challenge that we're laying out with national government. We need certainty, right? We can be a more certain development partner if we have more certainty ourselves. If we are finding out, if we're not getting certainty, then by definition we're limited in our ability to be as dependable as we would wish. And it'd be incredibly helpful for people like yourselves to continue to let government know about the scale of ambition and the scale of opportunity there is in Bristol to do incredible things to solve the housing crisis and deliver decarbonised economic development, inclusive decarbonised economic development. We have the ambition, we just need the government support and investment, not just to get public money, but their support to help us on the international stage to win that private sector, investment as well. So yeah, be our champions and we can all succeed.
We will certainly do that as best we can. Marvin, thank you very much. Everyone, I think we are out of time for today. So I just need to say thank you to Marvin, and thank you to everyone at home who's watching and contributing with questions. It's been immensely helpful. We'll be providing a summary after this on the Cratus website, which is www.cratus.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and keep an eye out for our next webinars and social events. So the next webinar is on the 16th of July, and that's with Councillor Vicky Slade, who's leader of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, along with other guests. So I hope you found today's session helpful, and please let's continue that collective conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.